Slam Music Survival Guide. We've got Nathan Carson of Nanotear, great music industry insider and author, and just really interesting cat who's had some crazy experiences in 2025. Quote from this episode: I don't want to have to wrap up my affairs and sell my records and finish my novel in 6 months. I want to have more time to live. Keep listening to see what it's all about. All right, Born from Chaos, Realms Above Us. What's up, everyone? Jack Mangan here for Support Life and Music. Uh, Today, we're talking to someone who is really a great fixture in the music scene, someone who really, one of those people, I'm actually anxious to talk to this guy because he knows so much. I'm inevitably gonna feel stupid during this conversation. He's one of those people who's just an absolute encyclopedia of knowledge and information, but in a good way, in a great way. So without further ado, I'll introduce my guest this week, Nathan Carson of Nanotear. Nathan, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, and as I said, I mean, I'm not just floating your boat. Like I said, you and I know each other through some journalism. You and I actually have a lot of worlds in common, which we'll have to touch on before we're done here. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot right off the bat. Where does this kind of wealth of deep knowledge of all things, the music that you love, where does this come from? Is this just how you're built? Talk to us
Well,
about this.
I mean, my parents were rockers to start with. My mom had seen Hendrix and Iron Butterfly. My dad had seen the Stooges, and they saw Led Zeppelin with Grand Funk. So there was no need to rebel in any kind of rock and roll way in my household. We had a family outing to see Spinal Tap in concert in '92. They took my brother to see Guns N' Roses, but I declined because I was too cool for Use Your Illusion at the time. Kind of wish I would have seen that now. But and then I also, I went through a comic book collecting phase. I was a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons. So like, I was a nerd and part of that sort of like collecting culture from a young age. And I used to, when I was anticipating The Empire Strikes Back coming out, I was reading Starlog magazine articles and famous monsters of Filmland. So like I love special features on Blu-rays. I'm really interested in the history of where things come from. I really like the lineage of, like any art that I appreciate. I like knowing where it comes from and what those people's influences are. And so I think it's just a natural curiosity for me to trace all those roots, and then I like to share that information with people. And one way I do that is I have an FM radio show that's weekly in Portland that's been going for 11 years called the Heavy Metal Sewing Circle on a community station. X-ray.fm is the stream. KXRY is the local call numbers. But I do, it's pretty much chronological every week, usually starting in the 60s and moving towards the present. And every week is just sort of a different way of tracing hard rock and heavy metal to the present, but I do not play the hits.
And well, yeah, and this is available online, by the way, the Heavy Metal Sewing Circle. That was definitely on my list of topics to touch on. But I love, it seems like there's a theme to almost every episode, right? The songs are all connected in some way. There's some kind of theme. You're not just throwing out random shit. It's you've got a theme.
There are lots of theme episodes, but there are a lot of episodes, excuse me. There are a lot of episodes that are not theme episodes, that are just whatever music has sort of crossed my radar over the last week or three. I usually just, I mean, through word of mouth and through research, I come across old music that I've never heard before all the time, and I throw it in a folder. And then when it comes time to make my show, the only through line really is the chronology usually. But there are certain theme episodes, and I have fun making those as well.
Okay, my bad then for misrepresenting, but it's very cool. I'm going to put you on the spot again. That's 2 times in 5 minutes. So since Rush, we're recording this late 2025, and Rush are kind of very much in the headlines right now because of the announced reunion tour with the new drummer, who she seems incredible. So give us a cool obscure fact that pull us a cool obscure fact about Rush from your, that you know about? I'm giving you a couple of seconds to kind of think of one, so you're not completely on the spot, but I am putting you on the spot totally. So
Oh,
if
that's
you have a
okay.
cool.
I mean, I've interviewed Geddy Lee for Vice. I'm a big Rush fan. I came to them late because I'm sorry. Um, I had grown up only having 2112 and moving pictures, and it was around the time of the R30 tour that my dad one day says, "I've never seen Rush." And I said, "Yeah, me neither." So my dad and I went and saw Rush, and it totally blew me away. And so from their 30th anniversary to their 40th anniversary, I saw them 9 times and interviewed Geddy and featured them in, many articles. One thing that I came across that I thought was pretty interesting was that Geddy was asked to produce Master of Puppets and ended up going and seeing them live and then passing on the gig. But what a world it would be if that had happened.
Wow. All right. There's an obvious joke about Geddy Lee producing And Justice for All.
Right.
The one of the world's most preeminent bass players producing the follow-up to Master Puppets, which of course had very, very low bass in the mix, putting it politely.
Yep.
Um, wow, that's I'd never heard that story. And again, I'm fanatical for both bands, so that's pretty cool. You do not disappoint, Nathan. Well, I don't. I mean, like I said, I definitely wanted to get to the heavy metal sewing circle, so I don't want to just skim over that. Is there anything else you wanted to tell people about the show and what it's all about? And again, how to. I think you already told us how to access it, but anything else you want to tell us about the show?
I mean, it's a really fun outlet for me it keeps me engaged with my record collection because I have thousands and thousands of records, but I don't always make time to, it's too much to just listen to for random reasons all the time. And on top of that, a lot of my personal listening is not loud music anymore. I mean, I love to go to the symphony and I listen to a lot of like Tangerine Dream and Vangelis at home. So, but I go out constantly and see loud, heavy music, and it's kind of like my day job to do that. And I play in a loud band, um, but it's not always one I want to listen to at home, like when I'm trying to chill out. So, having a hard rock radio show just makes me interface with those records and find deep cuts that I wouldn't otherwise listen to because we all gravitate towards our favorites and the songs that we know. So for 606 episodes now, I've been playing all the best songs by artists that either, I mean, there's more to Iron Maiden than Run to the Hills. There's more than Black Sabbath than Paranoid, Iron Man, and War Pigs. So I play all the other stuff by these bands besides what has been beaten down our throats by Clear Channel. And that's really fun. And then there's also, thousands of bands that didn't have that luck in the 70s or 80s to be on a major label or maybe they were on a major label, but still that just fell through the cracks. So to me, the show is about quality music and it has nothing to do with whether that was sanctioned by the industry or critically acclaimed or anything. To me, it's just, does this song rock? Do I like it? I'm going to play it.
All right. Yeah, that's very, very well said. I want to touch on that for a second, but first I'm going to ask, you open a detour. I'm going to take it for really quickly. What is your favorite era Tangerine Dream?
Oh, I definitely like the 70s Tangerine Dream the best, but it seems like each year in time, I'm able to go 1 year forward with Tangerine Dream. Like, however badly dated their keyboard sound was in like 1980, like now I can handle it up to about 1984. And next year I'll probably be able to handle Tangerine Dream 1985 because it's sort of like, the aesthetics of car styling or clothes or furniture. It's like there's a point in time where it's brand new, and then there's a point in time when it's dated and tacky, and then it kind of comes around again, and you're like, no, this is cool again. And that Yamaha DX7 in the 80s is like almost there.
All right. I don't want to just spend too much time on this and turn it into a cul-de-sac, but that is actually my favorite with the really, it's like a Casio drum machine or whatever. That's my favorite Tangerine Dream. I love like the Thief soundtrack is my
Oh, that's
and
a good one. Although my
logos.
favorite song on that is Confrontation, and that's not even by them. Um, That's a really good track though. But my favorite Tangerine Dream record is actually called Green Desert. It was recorded around the same time as Phaedra, but it was not released until some box set in the 80s. So it's kind of like an obscurity in their catalog. It has drums on it, and it's a really good record. And funny thing is, in the first season of Stranger Things, they used one of the songs from that. And I've listened to this record 100 times. So the second that came on, I jumped out of my seat and I was like, what? They're playing something off Green Desert on this TV show. That is so crazy.
Well, that is very cool. And I see this is what I'm talking about. Like, stop doing that, Nathan. Come on. I don't know that album. Come on. I'm supposed to be like a cool geek and you're like taking it like way past where I am. All right. Well, no,
It's not a competition. I just want to share the music with people, and it's up to them, how deep and curious they want to go with it. But I love learning, and I also will never pretend to know something I don't.
yeah. No, I appreciate that. Of course, I'm kidding. No, and I will say that's definitely like the audiophiles and the deep music geeks. I mean, I'm not going to lay claim to that to one particular group, but a lot of my background is in heavy metal, and a lot of people in the heavy metal scene have that same attitude of I want to find this great obscure song by Autograph. Like, don't sure,
Mhm.
turn up the radio is fine, but I want to like know the deep thing that they recorded in 1979. And like I said, that is absolutely not the domain of only one particular genre, but I definitely see it a lot there. And again, it's I applaud that in you. And I like I said, I'm kind of the same, but I haven't heard of Green Desert, so there you go. That's pretty awesome.
Well,
I'll look for it.
I think especially when you realize, the more you learn about the music industry, the more like a hit song, there's so many chance factors in that happening. And sometimes it's because it's the best song. Sometimes an artist's hit song is their best song, but very often that's not the case. I mean, certainly Paranoid is not the best Black Sabbath song. It just happened to be short and catchy and sound kind of like Led Zeppelin, and it resonated and it got pushed by the label and it got accepted by radio. But like Hole in the Sky to me is very much a better Black Sabbath song, but you'll never hear it on FM radio, and there's no good reason for that.
Yeah, excellent point. And along those lines, not Black Sabbath, but it was like the late '90s, the first time I heard Stargazer by Rainbow, which
Yeah.
is to me, one of the best songs ever recorded. But up until that point, and I did catch it actually on a radio station in New Jersey, but up until that point, I would have said, yeah, Rainbow, great, Long Live Rock and Roll, Street of Dreams, great band. But I didn't know about this absolute like one of the greatest songs ever recorded because of what you just said. So no, I definitely I applaud the love of music and the love of finding it, and also again I don't want to do all the talking. I'll let my guests do the talking, but I love that I really embrace what you just said. I think and yeah, I actually am a big fan of the columnist for Stereo Gum, Tom Bryan, who writes about the number ones, the number one records of every year, the Hot 100, Billboard Hot 100. And most of those are tracks that I don't really like very much, but I,
Mhm.
I love his writing and his analysis of them. And it illuminates what you just said. It illuminates that it was just a circumstance that made the song the number one song in the land for this week or for whatever, however long its run was. So
Yeah, I
really, I'm
mean,
just agreeing with you.
there
Yeah.
were some of the best bands ever that just had terrible managers or signed bad deals or lived in the wrong state or made the right DJ angry at them. Or, I mean, just it's so many circumstances that lead to a song being embraced and having success and being remembered. And unfortunately, if what the current corporate radio is doing is right, that's what the consumers want, is just to recognize the same 60 songs every day at the same time every day. And to me, that's just exhausting. There are so many, like Money by Pink Floyd, that's a fantastic song, but I never want to hear it again in my life because it's been on the radio every day at the same time for decades. And I think it sucks that songs like Don't Fear the Reaper have been kind of ruined by the radio. I mean, Stairway to Heaven, even. Like, that's a truly magnificent song, but we're all sick of it because it has been abused by the radio. Like, why is that on every day instead of trodden under hoof or whatever? I mean, so anyway,
Trampled
um,
underfoot.
Trampled
Yes.
Underfoot.
Yeah.
Thank you. It
Yeah.
was my friend's band had had a song called Trampled Under Hoof, and I think it might have been about Calabas from Clash of the Titans. But anyway,
Nice.
I also remember, it's another tangent, I remember the night I heard Stargazer by Rainbow. It was actually even more recent than you. I heard that in probably 2001. Witch Mountain, my band, played in Denver, and this freak blizzard blew in while we were sound checking, and the TV went out, and the only people that we played to were the other bands and the people who were in the bar at like 4 o'clock that day when the blizzard blew in. And that band, there was a doom band from there called Turambar, and they had like this squat building that was also a motorcycle shop. And we drove in the snow and stayed there, and we crowded around this wood stove and smoked a joint, and they put Stargazer on the cassette. And I had a real experience with that song that night, and it was like, how do I not know about this? It's so good.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's an unforgettable story. And that's a great topic too. For either one of our shows is these great stories about because there are some songs like, yeah, I don't know, I heard it on the radio, I guess. I don't know. Like I heard Who Can It Be Now on the radio or on MTV, but there's some songs like I know the exact moment I heard it. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
where I was, what was happening. Yeah. Um,
Well,
so
anyone
let's
out there who hasn't heard Stargazer by Rainbow, get on it because it is one of the best songs ever by anybody.
Yeah, it just showcases some of the most brilliant minds at the top of their form of songwriting, performance, composition. It's just yeah, it's everything that's good about rock and roll music. All right, well let's get to some of the slam stuff. So and I think we're kind of there already. So talk to me as I mean, you wear so many different hats, but talk to me, as someone who represents bands, and none of the band you don't represent like a Taylor Swift or The Weeknd. You represent like bands who are in the trenches, working hard and doing cool stuff. What are some of the challenges for you and your musicians, but in the current landscape today? Like, what are the things that are challenging you and yours on every front, on mental health,
Sure.
on success, and attention, and every front? Huge question, I know.
That's okay. I mean, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is US immigration. I work with a lot of international acts, and it's really complicated and expensive to bring bands from out of the country, and that includes Canada. And it's just really disheartening that the current administration in particular, but not that, I mean, it wasn't great before, but it's worse now. It just seems like US immigration treats artists coming here like it's not important, like in general our society tells us that music is a hobby that's for fanatics. It's not respected the way sports are, and it's just and we even have people in DIY communities that think that if you try to make music your business or your day job that you're doing something wrong. So it's like on the right side you've got people saying this is not important to most people, and on the left side you've got people saying, well, concerts should be free or $5. I grew up going to $5 shows, why isn't it $5? When I try to work with this sort of middle class of artists that are maybe not quitting their day jobs, but at least trying to make it worth everybody's time. To, you'll never, unless you are Taylor Swift, you're never going to be compensated financially for the amount of time and effort and blood and sweat and tears that you put into your band. Like people who have been doing this for 20 years, maybe they're getting a decent payday now, but it's still not really going to take up the amount of that they invested and volunteered for their own art in the first place. But, long story short, $5 shows started in the 1950s, and gas was like 20 cents a gallon. And so think about what it costs for a band, what it costs for a band to get in a van and travel from state to state today. Yeah, it's cheaper to record an album, but it is not cheaper to get on the road. And so when I see people complaining about concert tickets that are $20 or $30, I feel like that is an anti-art statement, and it is disrespectful to the fact that these people are trying to have a career. Yes, I think $400 Paul McCartney tickets or Bruce Springsteen tickets that are 1,000 or whatever. I mean, there is certainly a threshold over which anytime you see platinum seating or the merch cuts that are at these large venues, I mean, there's definitely a side of the industry, like in the big corporate world, that I'm also very much against. Portland was the last city of our size to not have a Live Nation venue, and they found a way to get a foothold here, and they're building one now. And I went and spoke to the city on behalf of trying to keep them out, but all they could see was money being invested in the city. And I tried to explain to them, I'm like, you're helping them build a giant vacuum cleaner that sucks money out of our economy and takes it away and gives it to these corporate people that don't live here. But all they could see was, oh, they want to build a new venue, and that's good for the construction company. And so anyway, I like working with bands that are really dedicated and serious, that make truly uncompromising art that I believe in, and that are interested interested in growing, and hopefully not getting quite into that stratospheric arena type place, because I prefer, whenever possible, to work with independent promoters and venues around the country. And over a certain size, that almost doesn't exist because Live Nation and AEG own all the big rooms. And it's not that I will never work with those companies. In certain markets, there's no other option because they've bought up everything. And on top of that, a lot of independent people that I knew who struggled in this industry for decades finally took jobs at Live Nation because they're in their 40s or 50s and they want to have insurance and they want to have, a day job that, so there are good people that ended up working there just because they wanted to stay in the industry and they were tired of, how they were being paid or treated in some small club that couldn't afford to do better for them. So it's all a very nuanced shades of gray thing. But when it comes down to it, like, I try to really be aware of the DIY roots that I have, but also professional enough that I've had bands on tour with Tool playing in arenas. And, it's important for me and my artists that I can interface with both. But the main thing I try to do is create situations that are a win-win for everyone. A lot of agents, they're only thinking about their clients and they're willing to burn a bridge to get as much money as possible. And I'm looking at it like we're an ecosystem, and without these independent promoters and venues, we don't have anything. And without the audience, we don't have anything. So how can we create the best experience for all involved where everybody's winning and everyone's having a good time and everyone's getting paid?
Yeah, I mean that's there's so much to unpack, but that's really a great answer to the question. I think it's also something that people aren't really aware of, or maybe don't care. I mean, I'm gonna say something maybe a little controversial. Maybe the most casual concert goers don't need to know or care too deeply about their local venues, which ones are independent and which ones are part of kind of the big Live Nation and other big corporations. So I don't, but I think it's good for people to know. I think people should know. I'll leave it at that. But I don't. I will give you a chance to respond to that if I just said something really stupid or
Oh no, I mean,
inflammatory.
what I would say is go see your favorite artists, buy merch from them, support bands, but also if you have independent venues in your area, those are also very important to support because it's a sort of a dying breed. It's like the conglomeration and the number of like venues that are bought by corporations or employees that are absorbed from those venues when the corporations move in is a very real thing. And so don't regret it after it's gone. Support it while it's still here and functioning.
All right. Well, and by the way, because I do have some more questions about the life in the industry, but let's not squander this opportunity. Tell us some of your the great alumni from or by the way, Nanotear is the organization, is your booking organization. Tell us some of your great acts who are in your current and your past, your
Sure.
alumni.
Well, it's been going for just over 20 years now. It was very much a kind of a part-time thing when I started it, but it's become my full-time day job. And I've even stopped doing a lot of, I used to DJ 3 or 4 nights a week and write for all these different magazines and periodicals just to kind of supplement my income. But thankfully, enough of the bands have grown with the agency that in this synergistic way, everybody's doing a lot better than we were 20 years ago. I mean, I remember the first time I got a $400 guarantee for one of my flagship clients, and it felt like, all right, we're getting somewhere. But that same band might be getting 10 or 20 grand for a show now, and that's because they've earned it and they are legends. I'm not going to say who that is, but some bands that have been with me almost since the beginning include Yob and Acid King, and I still work with Agalok. I booked their first show ever, and we're still tight. In fact, I just went with them to Brazil and Mexico to tour manage them at some big festivals that they were headlining. I had, until quite recently, been working with this band called Castle Rat that has just been exploding this year. It's pretty exciting to kind of pick a band that was unknown and had not played outside of their home state, and then have them pop off to such a degree that the greater powers took them away from me already. But that's part of the game. Apparently, I hadn't really had that happen before, but I guess I have to take it as a compliment to a degree.
You picked a winner for sure.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly. Blackwater Holy Light is a really great band that I work with. Working with Jinx Dawson of Coven, the original satanic rocker. Like, she's still going, and she's in her 70s, but she still puts on a hell of a show. Just had Crypt Sermon, this really amazing doom band from Philadelphia. We just had them as direct support to Bruce Dickinson. There's this mathy noise rock band from the 90s called Dazzling Killmen that just recently reformed. I'm going to be helping them with future shows. A doom band from Portland called Mismore that I've been hooking up with lots of shows. Yeah, there's just a lot
Conan,
going on.
Yeah. Are you still with Conan?
Absolutely. I think I booked 10 tours for Conan now, and I'm working on the next one already. There's a noise rock band out of Atlanta called Horrors that is constantly on the road. There's another band from Philadelphia called Sonia that I'm really in love with. So yeah, definitely keeping busy. It's like 35 bands. You can go to nanotear.com and see the full roster, and also the list of alumni. So I've worked with a lot of amazing bands over the years that either broke up or have moved on in their own way, but like, really, it's all a pretty friendly group.
That's great. Yeah. Well, again, my hat is off to you for that. I have about 45 more questions, but I'm going to have to consolidate it because, I don't want to keep you here all day and our listeners here all day, but I've definitely a couple of things I want to get to. Well, I mean, the first one, I'll ask something a little serious, and this is it back to the industry, is what is your, let me think of the way to frame this for someone in your position is how is the current streaming model affecting you and your artists? I mean, you were just talking about concert tickets prices going up, and of course that's part of the reason is because of streaming. But I mean, I guess what's your take on the streaming landscape and where we are and what we can do to make things better for artists?
Well, I constantly thank myself every day that I started a booking agency and not a record label, because 20 years ago it was still a viable idea to have a record label, but in the long run, I mean, it is an extremely tough business because most people don't buy records anymore. Most people, you ask them, when was the last time you went to your local record shop and browsed? And they can't even remember. I mean, there are obviously the nerdy enthusiasts like us that still do that and like to dig through crates and find things. I've personally, I bought thousands of LPs in the 90s because they had so little value. So I could get every Slayer record for $3 a pop at that point in time. That's kind of where we're at with CDs right now. I've become like a really big CD buyer because anything you can imagine is $5, and that includes bonus tracks and rarities that I can play on my radio show. So I really am enjoying the CD glut being kind of like the record glut was in the 90s. But to answer your question, streaming doesn't pay well unless you're making millions and millions of streams. I'm not going to begrudge anyone who doesn't want to have a record collection in their home, and I understand that the convenience of having access to millions of songs for $12 a month it's hard to beat. My ears personally don't like compressed music that much, so unless I was gonna invest in like a higher tiered subscription from Tidal or someplace that does uncompressed music, that just would not interest me. But the average person is listening through their Bluetooth speaker and really doesn't care about audio quality that much anyway. And the fact that they're enjoying music at all is great. Like the radio is not offering us many new options. So, those algorithms do to some degree help people discover new music. So it could be worse. It's funny, if you go watch on YouTube, there is a Charlie Rose interview from the year 2000, and it was a debate between Lars Ulrich and Chuck D about Napster. And at the time, we were all convinced that Chuck D was right and that Napster was okay and that Lars was being a dick. But you watch that interview now, and it's so prophetic. Everything Lars said was going to happen has happened. And Chuck D sounds utopian, but off the mark. And it's so strange the way that interview has aged. But
Wow.
in the biggest scheme, my opinion is that piracy and streaming are way less of a problem for bands than the fact that there are just so many bands. Like, there are literally millions of bands. And I think that is really almost a bit, and I don't want anybody to stop playing unless it's Creed or, that Creed can stop playing. But I mean, sometimes I wish there was a government grant that would say, if you're in a band and you would take $10,000 to break up and never reform, here's your money.
Like the farmers who get paid to not grow these kinds of crops.
Right.
Like...
Yeah. Because it's like, what's your reason? If your reason is you have to make art because it's in your soul, and that $10,000 wouldn't be worth it to you to break up, then good, keep making music. And if you're just like a weekend warrior and you want to play in your region on the, a couple times a year, like because it's fun, that's great too. But there are so many bands clogging up the tour circuit that really have no business being out there. They're chasing trends. One member of the band has money, so they have a brand new van and Guitar Center backline that their parents paid for, and there's just nothing new being said or done. I would like to see all that garbage like removed from the system with Drano or money or whatever it takes. Like, it's just, in the 70s, if you were a really good band, a major label would pick you up and put your record out. That didn't guarantee that you had a hit, but there was infrastructure and investment there. And now it's tough for any new band to get even an indie deal or get out of the gate, because there's literally just too many bands, and it spreads people's attention really thin. And I just think either you have to bring something new to the table musically, which is harder to do all the time, or if you're a traditionalist, you need to be one of the best in the world at it. And like, Stoner Doom is a great example of a scene that, when my band started in 97, there was one band in each state. Like, we were a tiny minority of people playing a very unpopular style of music, and we did it because we loved it and we wanted to be part of this tradition. But now there's a dozen mediocre stoner doom bands in every town in America, and people think it's an easy style to play. And yeah, it's easy to play it poorly, but it's hard to play it really well. And it is also hard to get anybody to care about a new band in that genre unless they're really, really good. And I welcome any band in any style that's world class great. But it's hard to be world class great when you only can make time on evenings and weekends. Keith Moon became one of the greatest drummers in the world in his 20s because by the time he was 18, that was his full-time job. It's the same reason we don't have a Renaissance painters anymore. The apprenticeship is totally gone, and people have to work for a living, and they make art when they have time to. And I think that limits the quality of what we get in the end.
Headbangers, how are you? I'm super. Thanks for asking. Mike Cobby's Headbangers. Listen to me on 94.9 and 104.5, The Pick. at pickidaho.com. Yeah, I'm in Arizona, and it broadcasts out of Idaho Falls, Idaho. Idaho, Idaho, out of pimp. But you can stream it and tap that app, pickidaho.com. And don't forget about Slam. Da-da-da, da-da-da, let the boys be boys. No, not that Slam. That's a hip-hop song. Yes, I know hip-hop. So anyway, yes, support Slam.
Yeah, again, perfectly stated. Now I'm going to say something I don't believe, but I'm saying it for you to shoot it down. Is it because, and we'll take painting as well, is it because we've taken the art form to its limits and there's not really much more to be said in painting or in Stoner Doom? Like it's like there's only so many ways you can play your drop D guitar, over the sludgy, fuzzy, fuzz box. Is it because we're running out of new artistic avenues?
There's always going to be a way to hybridize with something else. And I think the problem too often is somebody wants to play Stoner Doom and they just listen to Stoner Doom. Whereas the Black Sabbath, who was inventing that, were listening to jazz and classical and blues and rock and coming to derive a new form out of these other things that they were a fan of. So if you want to do something new with a traditional form, you have to bring in something else. And of course, we've seen metal is successfully hybridized with literally everything. There's dub metal, there's country metal, there's rap metal. Like, you don't have to like it, but it exists and people have tried it. And it is up to new minds to creatively come up with ways to keep these things fresh. And, heavy metal is 50 years old now, and it's still an extremely vital style of music. And yeah, a lot of it is retro leaning, but not all of it. And I can't say that a lot of new metal bands are that interesting to me, but when they are, I applaud them because, it needs to move forward. So anyway, yeah, I do think it is harder to come up with new twists and new ideas, but that shouldn't make people stop trying.
Perfect. Yeah, perfectly stated. And people are still doing really interesting things in 2025 with blues music, which at its root is a couple of simple chords and some solos over it. And again, don't take me to task on that, listeners, and Nathan, because obviously not. I don't want to reduce anything or oversimplify anything. But again, I think I'm saying this in agreement with Nathan. I think you're right. I think you can still do some interesting things. Like I said, I was kind of just putting that out there to get
As a
the
devil's
response.
advocate.
Yeah, as a devil's advocate, exactly. So, all right. Well, again, this is a topic we could take on ad infinitum, but I definitely want. There's a couple more things I want to get to before we're done, and I've already kept you a little while, so I want to tie the next two questions together. So you have had a fucked up year, to say the least. So I'm my hat, not literally, 'cause I want to show off my hair, but my hat is off to you for your perseverance through what you've endured this year, and it's your story to tell. So I'm going to let you tell everyone, but tell people what you've been through and how you've kind of kept a positive attitude through it, and then there'll be a part two to this. But go ahead and,
Sure.
if you don't mind, please share.
Well, I guess it starts a couple of years ago. I was at a Doom show and I got slammed into the monitor and I got a hernia. And I got that repaired, but it was still kind of bothering me. And so last December, I got some imaging done on it and they said, oh, it's pretty normal. It's no big deal. And in the fine print at the bottom of the scan, it said small lesion near liver. And I was like, well, what's that? And the doctor said, oh, everybody's got those. Don't worry about it. And maybe it's because I'm a booking agent or just my personality, but I advocate for myself and I ask questions and I don't just accept simple pat answers like that because I don't believe that, one size fits all for any solution, particularly medical one. So I said, well, why don't we find out more? And they did some blood work and they were like, oh, wow, you have really high blood tumor marker levels for cancer. And we think, it could be in your liver. And I was like, geez, like as someone who has, like, I'm a very moderate drinker. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I eat mostly organic food. I'm not, you know, perfect, but I do take my health pretty seriously, and I've lived, a fairly healthy lifestyle for a long time. And so on Christmas Eve, I had a liver biopsy, which is the most painful thing I've ever endured so far. That you have to be awake but sedated but consciously, and you have to hold your breath so that they can get a needle through your abdomen and into your liver and pull a chunk of it out. That was rough. But what the answer was okay, there is cancer in your liver, but it's only like trace amounts, like 1%. So we think it's coming from your thyroid. So they did further scans. And yes, indeed, my thyroid was pretty much cottage cheese, and a bunch of lymph nodes were compromised as well. So in January, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, which is a pretty scary thing to hear, and was a very existential issue for me to sort of, go over in my mind. And so in February, I had my thyroid and a bunch of lymph nodes removed. If you can see, I've got a pretty good scar across my neck. It looks like I came out of a Highlander movie successfully. And, I had to heal from a fairly major surgery. One of my vocal cords is still kind of paralyzed. I have like a lot of numbness in my neck and shoulders still. But because of having my thyroid removed and taking replacement hormones for thyroid, and having a very specific gene mutation that causes the cancer that actually has a very specific targeted pill therapy, my cancer levels have been reduced by 90 to 99% since then. So I've already played my drums at a concert. Witch Mountain played one of the acid bath shows in Seattle in June. I've been riding my BMX bike around the park. I'm working, I'm DJing, I'm writing. So I'm kind of doing all the things that I was. So, really what I take away from this is two main things. One, you really have to advocate for yourself, particularly when it comes to doctors and medicine, because they have so many patients and so much information to keep track of. And I have had very good doctors. Like, I have no complaints. Like, everyone has been a specialist. I've been really, really fortunate. I did not have to do any kind of fundraising because insurance took care of everything. So I'm very fortunate in that way. But if I wouldn't have gotten that hernia and I hadn't asked questions, I could be in a much worse place, because the fact that it made it to stage 4 before it was caught is a bummer. It would have been really cool to catch it much sooner. So, and the other thing that I did was every time a new referral would come in for another appointment or another doctor, I wouldn't wait for them to call me to schedule, because that can take weeks and put you really far behind. I'd use my MyChart, and that notification would come up, and I would get on the phone and I would make an appointment immediately. And so, I got my diagnosis on Christmas Eve, and on February 19th, I had my thyroid out, because I just was not waiting around for this to happen. So advocate for yourself and get your checkups, get your colonoscopy, like whatever it is. Like, I know people who are scared to go to the doctor or dentist, and all they're doing is blowing it for having a long life. But the other thing that was good for me is, I'm a lifelong atheist. I have feared death for decades. And, the idea of losing my consciousness to permanent oblivion was really not something I look forward to. But the moment this kind of sank in, like what I was facing, I've just immediately felt like I'm so glad that I've lived the life that I've had, and that I've done all these things that I've wanted to do. Like, so many people, need security or have a family to take care of or whatever it is. And so they live so much of their life working for a boss, being in a cubicle, not being at home or traveling or doing the things that they want. And, I've been making music. I've turned down so many salaried jobs. I've traveled to like 35 different countries. I've made albums. I've written books, and, tried to help as many people as I could along the way. And so rather than really just feeling that immediate fear of of mortality, I just kind of felt this relief, like, God, I'm glad that I have done the things that I wanted to do. And it was a surprise because I didn't expect that reaction, but it was just kind of an immediate feeling.
Well, that is amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. And I think you just answered what was going to be one of my follow-up questions, was about how you, because I think a lot of people in that situation, in the situation that you found yourself in, would just give in to despair and would just kind of, they would go through the motions and do what their doctors tell them to, but but that's the opposite of what you did. You were very proactive, and it sounds like despair, again, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like
Yeah,
despair
yeah.
never entered the picture.
Well, another thing that the doctors have told me, I mean, yeah, I could have given in to despair and, I would not be talking to you the way that I am right now. But I'm a very constructive, proactive person. I'm not lazy. I'm pretty disciplined, and I like living and doing what I'm doing. So I didn't want to have to wrap up my affairs and sell my records and finish my novel in 6 months. I want to have more time to live. The doctors tell me that the majority of their patients that are in a similar circumstance to me, so many of them are diabetic, obese, have terrible diets, smoke cigarettes, drink, like whatever it is, don't take their medication on a schedule. Whereas I pretty much followed all their instructions, but also even, looked into other things that I could be doing, like grinding up flaxseed to put on my oatmeal in the morning, and taking my medication on the right schedule, and getting out and walking and riding my bike and eating good foods. And I probably have, since the surgery, I probably average like 1 beer a month. I asked the doctor, I was like, what about drinking? And they were like, well, what would you like? And I said, I don't know, 1 beer a week would be nice. And they're like, yeah, you can do that. But I haven't even been doing that because it's just not that important to me. Like, I like the taste of a beer with a meal now and then, but it's just never been that paramount to me. I still smoke weed every day. They say that's fine.
And it works for Dr. Dre, right? So, but well, let me, and then, so this, I want to, again, because I really appreciate all this time, especially, again, I recognize that this is this year, so I'm taking up a lot of your time, but I definitely want to get to what is your advice for people who are, whether they're sick or just life has gotten to them? What is your advice for people to persevere and kind of not give in to despair and not kind of start looking at at suicide or succumbing to
Sure.
their addictions or demons? What's your advice for people to kind of get through that?
Well, I know this is easier said than done, but I think the most important thing is, if things are giving you anxiety that are beyond your control, don't dwell on that. Like, you can only, there are things that are within your control and things that are without. Obviously, like the political situation nationally right now is pretty horrifying, but it's also beyond any individual's ability to do much about it. So I'm not saying we should be apathetic. I'm not saying that we should tune it out. I think it's good to be aware, but there are things that you can control to make your life better. And I guess I just really believe in baby steps. I think it's very easy for people to get overwhelmed by these huge tasks and goals that seem insurmountable or unreachable. But usually, for anything that you want, there's a first step to take. And a lot of times that is making a list, or making a call, or making a plan. And I just find over and over throughout my life, just taking the first step, it means you're already an inch closer to wherever you're trying to get to. For me, in the late 90s, I had a lot of stress and anxiety and um, insomnia. And I made a list of the things that I was worrying about, and I quit drinking caffeine, which I've been off caffeine since like 1999. For a lot of people, caffeine is coffee is totally healthy. I just have a sensitivity to it. So this is just personal choice. Um, I found that when I went through my list and started kind of like crossing things off that were, one of them was like, I had an unpaid gas bill from years before that was in collections. And it wasn't, I think it ended up being like $200 or something. And I'd let it go for a long time. And like getting that taken care of and whatever else it is that, cross those things off your list. For me, quitting caffeine and reducing the list of stresses in my life, insomnia went away. And, I've slept very well and have for 25 years since then. It doesn't mean that there aren't new stresses that arise, but I just really feel like it's important to take whatever that stress energy is and just put it into something constructive, whether that's a creative project or something that needs to happen in your life. That is an energy that you're feeding off of. And rather than just cycling and spinning and wasting that energy, put that energy into something that you can actually do something about. And I feel like the more you do that, the more you have the life that you want, and you will be happier and more grounded from it.
All right. Very well said. All right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and I appreciate, obviously I like the caveat at the beginning that it is easier. It's a discipline, I think, to do that. It's not just, just because there are people who, and this is not what Nathan said. I'm not, but there are people like, just take care of that problem. Why would you let that sit there? Just take care of it. And then, the people on the other side of it can't communicate. I'm not able to. I'm in a bad spot. I can't.
Yep.
It's so much stress to do that. So yeah. But I again, it is constructive advice. Nathan's not scolding you if you're struggling with that, but it's it is the right way. I definitely hear all that, and so
I think the baby step is really the key. Like, don't get overwhelmed by the end game. What is the very first thing you can do to make a step toward improving whatever it is that's going on with you, or that's bothering you, or that you wished that you had done and hadn't? Like, it's never too late. And I mean, I didn't start writing fiction until I was 40, and I'd wanted to my whole life, but finally I was like, okay, I hit 40. I want to write. I've done journalism, I've done music, I've traveled, I've had all these different careers. I actually have some life perspective now, and I know how to not be a hobbyist. And so instead of just wishing or talking about it, I'm going to start doing it. And I started writing, and I started selling stories almost immediately. And now a decade has gone by, and I have a novella and a graphic novel, and I've sold stories to like 25 different anthologies, and two of the last were to HarperCollins. And so, that helps with imposter syndrome a lot. But you can only get so far in your own head, and at a certain point you have to just take whatever that first step is toward what you want to either improve or change or do.
All right, yeah, perfect. And actually, you teed it up. Like I said, there are 40 more topics, but I think we've talked a good long time. You're welcome back on Slam, absolutely, anytime. We'll definitely have to have you back on as a panelist, and we'll talk some more in the future. But let's well, I have two more things,
Sure.
let's talk just a little bit about the fiction, because actually it is funny. Nathan and I, we know each other really through social media, but it's funny that we would find each other just in the same discussions about the fiction, especially speculative fiction, the fiction crowd, and then the music crowd. And we were kind of like, hey, didn't I just see you over on Ellen Datlow's conversation? Ellen Datlow, by the way, is legendary science fiction editor. But if you didn't know, but yeah, it's funny that we've both existed in that space too. And I think you just did tell a good summary of your fiction writing, but I don't know if there's more you want to elaborate on that, and even if there's some music fiction crossover. I'll give you the floor.
Well, I mean, I definitely would say that weird fiction and horror fiction, it suffers from some of the same issues that heavy metal does, in that there's a sense that everything's been done already, and it's hard to have your own voice. And so I guess I try to bring in more sex, drugs, and rock and roll to my work than some people do, because I think the gonzo approach is it's just my way of keeping it interesting, but also bringing, I mean, not that I live a particularly debaucherous lifestyle, but I've definitely been in rock and roll for a long time. And so that's something I can bring to my fiction that a lot of writers who are more like stranded in their bedroom, wallflower types, maybe don't have those same experiences. And so, I wrote a novella that came out in 2016 called Star Creek, and it is oddly similar to Stranger Things, but they didn't read my book and I didn't see their show. They came out pretty much simultaneously, but it is set in 1986 in the backwoods of Oregon and has like teenage kids, on psychedelic drugs, riding BMX bikes around, and strange alien creatures in the woods and things like that. So eating Eggo waffles. It's funny, just some of the similarities, but
Wow.
there's actually a book trailer on YouTube for Star Creek, Star with 2 R's, that you can see. But I don't know. My mother is a librarian. I grew up on science fiction, things like that, and I'd always wanted to write. But when I was 19, I read this book by Damon Knight called Creating Short Fiction, and in it he says, if you're not at least 30, go out and get some life experience before you want to be a writer. And I took that to heart and focused more on journalism instead, which was a great apprenticeship. I learned how to work with an editor, meet deadlines, word counts, and keep my grammatical skills honed. But when it finally came around to hitting 40, 10 years ago, I was like, okay, I have this muscle building in place, but I want to write wacky, crazy, far out science fiction and horror stories. And by that time, I'd had enough life experience that I had perspective and wisdom that I didn't have when I was 19. So many things when I was 19 were just big question marks, and now I have opinions about everything.
All right, well, perfect, man. It's been great talking to you. Like the things, you and I have talked quite a bit. You actually wrote a great piece for Metal Hall of Fame that I asked you to do a couple of years ago. So we've talked quite a bit, but it's good talking actually live, face to face. And as I said, you're welcome back on Slam anytime. I'm going to follow up for sure and try to get you back again. But why don't you take us out and tell us? Feel free to promote. I know you have so many things going on as a musician, DJ, writer, and promoter or tour. So take us out by promoting some of the things you have going on at the end of late 2025, early 2026.
Well, I actually put together a collection of all my fiction that I've written to date, and that's actually being shopped around right now. So I don't have a forever home for it yet, but hopefully soon. So I'll try to let everybody know once that happens. And also working. Really, most of this year was focused on my health and keeping my business going. And now that that's kind of back on track, I'm a little bit more in a place of creating new work that I can kind of promote next year right now. So I guess I've had 4 short stories come out this year. Some were new. The newest one was for a middle grade anthology from HarperCollins called Scaring and Daring, where they asked a bunch of ringer authors to take on a 19th century children's property. Like someone wrote a Swiss Family Robinson story, someone did Peter Pan, someone did Alice in Wonderland, someone did Secret Garden, and I wrote an Oliver Twist story set in the workhouse called The Gruel Master, and that just came out in August. And I was not one of the ringer authors that was invited. I was somebody who, because I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association, got to send in a blind submission, which means you take your name off the manuscript and you're competing with hundreds of your peers in the HWA, and they picked 3 stories from that batch, and mine was one of them. And what feels particularly good about that is that's the second time that's happened to me, because I sold HarperCollins a story 3 years ago that was about a queer cop during pandemic protests in Portland. And I thought it was too dark a story and that no one would want it, because it was kind of my cathartic way of dealing with the bullshit that we've had under the Trump administration in Portland, which is ongoing, obviously.
Yeah.
But that story resonated with the editors, and selling a queer cop story to a queer editor felt really good. Made me feel like I can write from the other perspective successfully. So anyway,
Nice.
so yeah, Scaring and Daring is one of the newest, and I've got an Amazon author page and also my link tree, which is nathancarson.rocks. It's a good place to go to find out whatever I'm up to.
All right, excellent. Well, yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate. I definitely wanted to talk. So we'll have to shelve it for another time. Again, I do want to be respectful of time. We'll have to talk Portland because I know Portland's been a thriving scene, and I know you've been very vocal about Portland long before it became a political football. With misinformation and all of that. Again, we won't go there. But maybe in the future.
I would say, in short, I've been all over the Western world, and there's no city I'd rather live in. I think Portland is very European, and it is one of the only cities this size, and maybe the only city this size in America where so many of the populace want clean air and clean water and to treat each other with kindness. And to be bullied by the Orange Führer over that is it's so ludicrous. And there is a website called isportlandburning.com, and it's just a ton of live cams all over the city and including the ice building. And you'll see that there's like 10 people there and a guy in a frog suit and a guy in a chicken suit, and they're like listening to music and dancing in the street. And like, to pretend that our city is on fire is just absolute nonsense.
Yeah, well, disinformation, yeah, it's everywhere. That's not what Slam is about. But again, people need to be safe and know the truth. So I appreciate you sharing the truth. And yeah, so keep doing what you do. Keep doing everything you do, Nathan. And thanks again. Thanks for being part of Slams. Thanks for the great stories today and anecdotes. And I hope I didn't keep you too long. But thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.